The law of assumption crowd often robotically regurgitates a lot of little aphorisms that they got from Neville. And it's cute and all to be like, you know, circumstances don't matter and persist and everyone is you pushed out. They say all of these as though these are very obvious and not actually very abstract, vague phrases. And so it's worthwhile to elucidate what the hell they're talking about. So the thing about them, though, is whenever a belief system gets going, a religion, a cult, there is always these kind of robotic little slogans that people kind of constantly reiterate. And then when you have a nuanced question, it's like they're like robots and they just keep repeating the phrases as though you're too stupid to understand. But life is full of complexity, dimension, and nuance. So I would like to talk about the law of assumption and whether you can change somebody that has like dark triad traits. Because a person that is dark triad is often lacking in empathy, and they're a pathological liar. So if you are trying to get a behavior change from them by assuming that they're not that way, can that work? That's what I want to talk about. Now, it's a complex thing, because part of it is once you've decided to label them as like a narcissist, a psychopath, a dark triad, once you've started to label them that, then they can only conform to your assumption, because you assume they always lie. You assume they don't have empathy. You have assumptions they have no guilt. They do anything to avoid shame. Like, as you start to construct this little profile of what their personality and characteristics and traits are, you start to really get into a confirmation bias. And so here's what I think about that. I think that in one aspect, you have gone so far into thinking that they're that way without thinking that there could be a scale, that there could be change, because everyone can change at any time. There are self-aware narcissists with YouTube channels. There's that guy, Ben Trapper, I think his last name's Trapper. He's a self-aware narcissist. You look at his oldest video when he first started, and then the video he has now, thousands of videos, he's really come a long way in realizing that a lot of his hiding from the truth, and a lot of his pathological lying, and a lot of his ways of life, his coping mechanisms, he's come a long way in by declaring that these are the manipulative tactics I've done. He has freed himself in a lot of ways and has changed and naturally gained more and more understanding and empathy, instead of a constant kind of constricted vampiric life. So here's the thing about your assumption. Okay, so say you want change from somebody that you believe has psychopathic or manipulative or narcissistic or dark triad, Machiavellian traits. So it's really hard, but you have to stop having this identity of them in that, because that's what's limiting you from seeing that they have other aspects of them. Even a narcissist, they may, if they are pushed to the brink of everyone knows who they are, and there's a fear of being exposed, they will look in the mirror. They might have been not avoiding the mirror, but there's a time when many will finally look in the mirror. But when you start to get into this kind of, the law of assumption, it's basically talking about how people conform to your assumption of them. So you do have to rewire your point of view and idea of them as a narcissist anyway. you have to realize that you have to view that as it's not a be-all, end-all label. It's not a full encompassing everything about them is this and fits into this pattern. And the thing is about psychological labels is once you get one attached to someone, then you just constantly look for confirmation bias, and you'll get it because that is the law. So it's but then at the same time, there have been times when you have been assuming that, and this is very common, people will assume, well, this person has to have empathy and guilt because I have empathy and guilt. And so they'll have that assumption, and then they'll get taken for advantage of or lied to, and then they'll realize it. So reducing these interactions of law of assumption and thinking that what you're assuming about somebody, then they always will be. You have to realize that yes, your assumptions are limited, and it's best to assume the best in somebody, but it's also good to realize who somebody is. You can't just constantly affirm that somebody has empathy, but then they're throwing you under the bus and they're doing things that show no empathy. So how do you navigate this? Like, say you're trying to manifest something from this type of personality. Well, if you can't get your head around, if you can't really convince yourself that they have even cognitive empathy, what I recommend doing is within the frame of their psychosis, what would persuade them to have a different behavior? Oftentimes with narcissists, it's wanting to keep that false image, looking like a good guy, good person. So frame your assumptions to how they want to look like a good person. Not that they are, but they know they want to look like one, so they will do this. So this is another thing that they might have, because they are kind of a coping mechanism that's built around avoiding shame. There is an aspect to them that does know what they did wrong. They do. So realize, say phrases like it weighs heavily on them, and they fear, exposure, public backlash. It doesn't matter if they are in a little bit of avoidance and denial, but you are just trying to get your assumption about them to be a little bit more fluid beyond they'll never do this. Like, you don't want to be in the energy of they have no regard, they'll never do this, I'll never get this back, I'll never have this, they'll never do this because they have no empathy. You got to get out of that and be more a little bit in, it weighs heavily on them to do this, to do right. They want to do right because they want to look like a generous person. They've got that false image to prove that as a moral person, they want to look good, they're going to do this. So if it's hard to manifest something you want from a dark triad personality, reframe it within the current frame of the assumptions that you have about their traits, and realize that nobody is just a straight up evil Disney villain. There are always inklings of guilt and empathy and awareness or fear of exposure. If they are straight up psychopathic, there's still the fear of exposure. So just play with the assumptions you do have about their characteristics, and realize that the law of assumption is all about just having the realization that there's so many aspects of people that are brought out, and they are not limited to evil and in this box. There are so many different assumptions that can bring out other sides of them, or that can bring them to that moment of epiphany and confrontation with self, that we should never assume that somebody is always eternally stuck in, and it shouldn't be stuck in being in devalued, kind of evil, don't have empathy, evil stance. And they also shouldn't be ever pedestalized so that they are beyond reproach. So I hope this made sense, but I just want to have some insight on kind of the law of assumption and the everyone you pushed out. And when you're trying to manifest behavior from a personality type that you have this assumption that they're a narcissist, first of all, work on the fact that you're assuming that, and that might not be true. Then if it really does have a lot of truth, realize, operate within that archetype, within the assumptions of that, how you could get what you want. So I hope this was helpful, and